We continue working on the structure of our project. In this lesson, we will work with the plugin territory. We will start with must use plugins. These are the plugins that load at the very beginning, even before we reach the step of loading the plugins themselves from the plugin folder. This is usually where you can put registration code, post types, so that it always initializes with WordPress and cannot be disabled. Because if we register the post types in a regular plugin, the site user might accidentally disable it. And the pages related to this post type will essentially stop working. So if it's an important post type, you can put it in M. And address, let's create a plugin E there and the second feature. If for the plugins folder we create separate directories with plugins, then for M, the plugin needs to be created immediately. Let's name it Game Store General PHP. In this lesson, I will not write any code in this file, but I must create a plugin. To create a plugin in WordPress, you need to start by opening the PHP tag and writing a comment. And in the comments, set the meta, which will be responsible for the configuration of the plugin itself. And consequently, the first field we need is the name of our plugin. We will use Game Store General. Next, the second field we need is the description. We can specify something like core code for Game Store. Next, we need to specify the version of this plugin. Next, we need to specify the author. Then the author's link, the license link, the text domain. And that's all. The path domain and other metadata do not concern us. We will stop here since this is our plugin. It will be responsible for some technical aspects. There will be no string translations in it, and overall the text domain can also be removed from here, especially. We will use Game Store for something else. Wonderfully protect rules are very simple in WordPress. To register a plugin, we use this kind of code. In the comments with metadata, we specify that this file is the plugin, and then all the boilerplate code that I will write here. It will be interpreted by WordPress and read. If we now go to the plugin folder on the site, we will notice that a separate mask appears here, US. And so if I go in here, I will see my newly created Game Store General. I cannot disable it. That's the beauty of this type of plugin. The code that is important for you to have on your site under any conditions cannot be disabled. It needs to be registered through the MasterMap plugin. Let's probably add something here. Let's disable one of the widgets on this page so that it doesn't display here using a cookie. Let's return to our code. I won't go into detail about what a cookie is. After all, this course is not entirely for beginners. It is assumed that you know what a cookie is and have worked with WordPress. But for those who still don't know, I'll explain briefly. A cookie is a function that allows us to hook into certain WordPress functions at specific points and set some of our own parts of code, some of our own logic, thereby changing the behavior. And as a rule, a hook consists of two parts: a function within which we will directly set the logic of what we want to do, and the hook itself, where we specify where we want to attach our function. So let's create our function. I call it Game Store Remove Dashboard. Widgets, and secondly, I will need the WordPress cube itself, and using functions and action, we call it. And the most interesting thing is that in this case, it offers me very good things specifically for this function on the web, dashboard, setup, and I want to connect to it. It understood this by the theme, the name for the functions that I set here. It is there that we can disable the necessary widgets from the page. We pass the first parameter directly to the WordPress function. We pass the second parameter to our function, in which we will set this body. I press tab to execute autocomplete. I return to my function. With my function, I call the global variable VP metaboxes. Next, using unsettled, Wonderful. It understands here too that I will be disabling for VIP and meta boxes. This way the dashboard activity widget, dashboard activity. We have this box. Okay. If I refresh the page logically, this box should disappear. Since the hook is registered and the plugin is loaded, indeed it disappears for us. A very simple logic. This is how the must-use plugin works and the code in this plugin is interpreted. I paused and took the remaining IDs from one of my projects. I simply have this code set in my framework, which I use for building, so that you don't have to search for these IDs yourself. You will have access to this code, to this archive, and I specifically inserted them for this purpose. You see how Copilot does autocomplete, but it doesn't always work as successfully and as well as in the video. In fact, it inserts a lot of junk and I rarely use it. To be honest with you, I interact more with the chat, making specific requests and receiving specific answers. Autocomplete is not something I use daily. And let's, as a final touch, use some indentation here to make it look nicer. We have finished with the must-use plugin. I added the remaining hooks and this entire page will be empty. We disable this block in this way. It's convenient when you go to the first page and don't see anything unnecessary. If any third-party plugins insert widgets here, you need to find them through the source code. Find their IDs and disable them in the same way, so that the first page remains empty, perhaps only displaying your own widgets. Next, we will need regular classic plugins. So let's go to the plugins directory and create them. We will create two plugins, one for the functionality and code on the back end, and the other for Gutenberg blocks. So for the first one, let's create it for functionality and name it Core Game Store. This is the rule for plugin development. Next, we first create a directory and use a unique name. Then, inside this directory, we create a main file that will have the same name. That is, it uses the same slug. So, I use Core Game Store as the main file, and in this main file, to let WordPress know that it's a plugin, the Gardens. Now I've created the file, but if I go to the plugins, simple, classic, there's nothing there. WordPress doesn't recognize it as a plugin yet. But first, I need to open the PHP code so that it reads the comment as a PHP comment. You need to write a tag to open comments and start filling it in. For such very trivial tasks, Copilot does an excellent job. Plugin name, let's call it Core Game Store. Next, the description of Core will go version, excellent, author, excellent, link to the author, excellent, license, link to the license. For this plugin, we will still set the text domain, which means the text domain is usually the slug of the plugin itself. That is, if our folder is Core Game Store, then our text domain is also Core Game Store, and domain is a link with the code. I will now simply create two constants that are usually always used in work later on so that it is not empty. That's why I will create them. So I am creating a constant strategy for plugin URL and plugin path. When writing constants, we must use a prefix for our project. The prefix is Game Store. And as the value of the constant, I will use the function plugin.dirURL and pass the parameter file. And a similar constant I will create nicely for the directory that is Game Store plugin dir. And I will already use the function plugin dir puff. Let's use puff as the constant here instead of dir. This code is not important to us for now. We just initialized two constants that we will use later in this course. And now if we look at our colored section with plugins, the plugin appears, but all the code within it is not interpreted until someone in the admin panel presses this activate button. Until it is pressed, these two constants do not exist for WordPress. As soon as they are pressed, Now WordPress can see and understand the value of these constants. We are done with the core plugin. Having a core plugin for the project is very important. Previously, developers working with classic themes, since they were in PHP, would throw everything into the theme directory. Both the registration of post types, handling of contact forms, and some social sharing. Any functions that were present on the site, all the PHP code was thrown into the directory. With the theme, but this is incorrect according to WordPress standards, all functionality, everything that needs to be written, should be in a separate plugin, but not in the theme, because very often users might disable the theme because they don't like the design. And when they click to disable the theme, they lose both the post type registration and a lot more, because the code stops being interpreted, and it seems to them that they've lost half of the site, half of the content. Technically, of course, this content is still present in the database, like the post type, but it doesn't display on the site because the theme is disabled. To avoid such problems, functionality is moved to plugins, and appearance is handled by themes. Since WordPress added the ability to build block themes and the concept of full site editing, this problem is eliminated because we are technically required to move all PHP code to be written within plugins, because in themes, of course, PHP files will work and be interpreted. There are even a few files, but the templates themselves are already HTML. We will have a separate lesson on file hierarchy, and we will discuss all the files that are in the template. But for now, it's important for you to know that everything related to functionality is written within plugins. In the theme area, you can write PHP, of course, but only if the logic of this code is responsible for the appearance of your site, not for functionality. We will return to this plugin later when we write its body. Right now, we need another type of plugin which will contain blocks for Gutenberg. For our Gutenberg content, this is a system that works on JavaScript, and blocks are written using a series of components to write code for blocks. And for the JSX code files to be compiled and interpreted, guys, you need to have Node.js installed on your system to ensure NPM works for you for building blocks. In WordPress, there is also something similar to a starter plugin, and it can be generated. So we will open the terminal right here in the editor. We enter the terminal. We are currently in the root directory in game. We need to go into the plugins directory now, because that's where we need to generate a new plugin. So we type cd plugins, create block command, which will directly create a new plugin containing the code responsible for the new block. We use npx WordPress /command create block. This command was created by WordPress specifically to avoid manually creating files, as we have done for some plugins so far, because there are more various files involved, and it will automatically create this block plugin for us, so to speak. And after this command, we need to set a name for our plugin. I will name it blocks game store. I press enter. It prompts me to install this package, create block. I agree. So he has now created a JSON block PC JSON and started installing the dependency. This will take a few minutes. All done. The dependency installation is complete. He even suggested a number of commands here that we will need to use as we work. We will get acquainted with all these commands later. Let's see what has been generated. So a new plugin, blocks, game store has been generated. It contains a folder called not modules, where he downloaded all the dependencies, but it's grayed out because this plugin also includes a gitignore file. And here, all the files that should not be sent to the repository, which will also be ignored, are added. Only the necessary files will be sent to the repository. In the src directory, we have the code responsible for one block. Let's take a look at the site to see what has appeared. A new block we activated. Don't forget to always activate newly created plugins, because very often students write code, don't activate the plugin, and then ask me why their code isn't working. It turns out they simply forget to activate it. Let's go to the posts, for example. Let's see what is it called? Our block is a simple text block that displays this text on the front end. And this text in the admin panel is called Game Store block. My task now is to demonstrate to you that it works. So we open a post, type a slash, search for the new block. Here's the Game Store block. If I select it, I see this placeholder. If I do this, save it, update the page on the site, and go to the post itself, I see this new block that was just created. Everything would be fine, but this function by default creates one plugin for one block. But this doesn't suit us, guys, because we need to put all our blocks that we will create into this plugin. So we will now change the source code. This plugin for ourselves to use it as part of our framework, because I do not recommend you. For example, if your site consists of 50 different block made screens, so to speak, I do not recommend registering 50 plugins for each individual block. You will have only one common plugin and everything will be inside it. So we will have the following hierarchy. Inside SRC, we will create directories for each individual block, and we will use this kind of naming, block hero. That is, for the hero block, I will use this name, and I will create another directory, block contact. For now, I am creating two blocks for myself. One will be called hero. The other, contact. Basically, everything you will write in the blocks, you will write in the directory with SRC. Build is never edited. Build is dynamic code that is generated from everything we write in SRC. It is generated into build with the help of this compiler that we run. And the second point is a common mistake for beginners. We will now write code in Ojo JSX, and you should always have the compiler running. I will run it a little later and show you what it is and how to run it. And always keep an eye on it. If you make any changes to the block and they don't appear on the site and you don't understand why, even though the code seems correct, always look down here where the compiler is running to see if it has issued an error. Because if it issues an error, it sometimes crashes and stops working, and you might not even notice. You can make edits to the code, but it won't compile it, and WordPress won't see these changes. All right, let's return to our structure, to our hierarchy. So right now in the src1.blog directory, we have these files, and it basically compiled them here into the build. We are changing the structure. I have all these files. Selecting and inserting them into Kira, you see I rearranged exactly the same files. I copy and paste into contact, try Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, it worked. Next, I'll change their names. So, the first one will be named create block hero here. It can be done like this. He used these prefixes because I set them as the name. This is the game block, and he basically used it. But we set it here to be more thematic, more appropriate. Everything else we are not editing for now. It doesn't concern us. That is, for now, we are only editing the JSON file block. And the same goes here for the contact block. So the contact block means the create block is a prefix that you need to make unique for all blocks, and this is the name of your block. Right, that here, instead of create block, I will use my own prefix. Like this, because later I will be doing copy paste of this block. And so that it doesn't appear game create block, let it be my prefix. The same thing here. That's it. Basically, I didn't do anything extraordinary. Just transferred all the code to a separate directory, further in the file, where this function is registered with the register block type function. I will modify it a little. Now it registers one block from the build directory where it was compiled up to this point. And now I will have many blocks, and I will simply assign them specific paths. For the first one, I will have a hero block. For the second, I will be blocked. Contact block. If I try to check something on the site now, nothing will happen at all because WordPress doesn't see all these changes. Well, more precisely, it will see it now because PHP reads it perfectly, but it won't find it. Here are these two new directories that I just sketched out. To have them appear in this build folder, we need to run the compiler. For this, we go to the terminal. We need to be, remember, we ran the cd command and we ended up in the plugins. But to run the compiler, we need to enter this directory, blocks, game store. That is, inside this plugin, I will write cd again and set the path to blocks, game store by pressing enter. Now, I am already in this directory. I run the command npm run. Start. This command will start the compiler. The compiler has started and I see a green message, which means it compiled everything successfully. Let's take a look in the build folder. Look, there's no list of files anymore. Instead, our two blocks are there. They, of course, contain the necessary compiled code that WordPress will read. That is in this simple way. We transformed the system from one plugin per block to one plugin for many blocks, and we will simply keep adding our blocks. Right here constantly, when we work with this plugin, don't forget to run this command npm run start. Let's check on the site to see what's happening. The plugin is activated. No need to activate it again. The current block is no longer there. So Gutenberg indicates that it doesn't see such a block. It sees a piece of HTML code. We remove it. Go to the blocks and first search for hero. Here is our hero block. Let's add it. A placeholder appears, which is specified in the code. Let's click on contact. Here it is, this new block. Click on it. The same placeholder, since we haven't changed the body of these blocks yet. The only thing up to this point, there was a blue color, now it's gone. Most likely, a class is set in the CSS files, and we changed the block ID, and therefore the class stopped being responsive. Well, yes, indeed, you see the old ID in the class, and that's why the blue color no longer has any effect. But we will get acquainted with the structure of blocks with building blocks in the next lessons. Right now, it was important for us to create the hierarchy for our project. And in principle, we have successfully coped with this task. We have a theme. In the FEMS directory, we have a plugin for core code, for PHP code, for functionality. We have a plugin where we will separately store each block for Gutenberg. And we have a must-use plugin where we will store important functions that are crucial to ensure they are never lost and always loaded. When we finish working, we can either close the editor or simply kill the terminal, since the compiler is still running. If any changes are made in the AAMUD blocks game store directory, only in this directory, it will continuously compile. You can terminate it in this way. We need to push the data to the GitHub repository. And with that, we conclude this lesson. See you in the next lesson.